He was a man of power, a millionaire doctor admired by many. Yet behind closed doors, his arrogance ran deep, and when a black nurse walked into his world, he treated her as if she didn't belong. To him, she was invisible, unworthy of respect. But life has a way of humbling even the proudest. One night, when his own daughter's life was slipping away, the very nurse he mocked stood between despair and hope. What happened next would silence every whisper of doubt. Dr. William Hayes lived in a world of prestige, a millionaire physician with a sprawling estate, respected colleagues, and a reputation that made people stand a little straighter when he walked by. He believed his success gave him authority over everyone around him. To his patients, he was a savior. To his staff, he was untouchable. And to himself, he was above judgment. But beneath the polished marble floors of the hospital, a quieter story unfolded. Nurses moved briskly through the corridors, carrying the true weight of care, charting vitals, comforting families, and watching over lives that teetered between hope and despair. Among them was Maya Johnson, a skilled and compassionate black nurse whose steady hands and quick instincts had saved more than a few lives. She wasn't wealthy, she didn't carry a famous title, but her work spoke louder than words. Still, in Dr. Hayes's eyes, she was just another face in a uniform. Her years of experience, her countless hours at patients' bedsides, meant little to a man who measured worth in wealth and status. Subtle dismissals, passing remarks, even cold stares reminded Maya daily that no matter how hard she worked, she would never be seen as his equal. Yet Maya endured, not for recognition, not for praise, but for the patients who needed her. Every day she showed up, carrying a quiet strength that no insult could shatter. What she didn't know was that her resilience would soon be tested in a way that would change everything. Because when tragedy struck at the heart of Dr. Hayes's own family, the nurse he overlooked would become the one person he could not ignore. It began like any other evening. The hospital buzzed with its usual rhythm, machines beeping, footsteps echoing, hushed voices of families waiting for news. Maya moved through it all with calm precision, checking charts, adjusting IVs, offering gentle words that carried more comfort than medicines sometimes could. Dr. Hayes, meanwhile, walked the halls with his signature air of superiority. He dismissed the staff with curt nods, rarely acknowledging the people who kept the place alive. His eyes often skimmed over Maya, as though her presence was barely worth noticing. But whispers had begun to travel, quiet recognition among the nurses and even patients who saw Maya's steady brilliance. They knew she was the one you wanted by your side in a crisis. The crisis came faster than anyone expected. One night, as a storm raged outside, a frantic call came through. An emergency in the ER. A young girl rushed in, barely breathing, her skin pale, her pulse fading. Nurses scrambled, doctors shouted orders, and in the chaos, Dr. Hayes appeared. His face drained of color, his confident stride faltering. The patient was his daughter, Emma. The world seemed to freeze. This was no ordinary case. The man who commanded everyone else was suddenly powerless, a father watching the most precious part of his life slipping away. Maya was already there. She moved quickly, assessing Emma's condition, her mind racing through protocols, her hands steady despite the urgency. Dr. Hayes hovered, shouting instructions that clashed with reality, his fear blinding him. The other staff hesitated, torn between his authority and the nurse whose calm was cutting through the panic. Minutes felt like hours. Emma's breathing grew weaker, alarms blared, and the room swirled with tension. Maya could feel every eye on her, but she didn't falter. She knew exactly what needed to be done, steps that couldn't wait for permission or approval. She acted. Her voice, firm and clear, cut through the storm of confusion. Orders flowed from her like second nature, compressions here, medication now, airway secured. Some obeyed reluctantly, others instinctively. But within moments the scattered chaos became coordinated precision, all led by the nurse who had been invisible moments before. Dr. Hayes tried to interject, but his words stumbled. Fear had stripped him of his usual control. All he could do was watch as the woman he had dismissed for so long became the center of the fight for his daughter's life. Time blurred. Sweat beaded on brows, gloves snapped, monitors beeped relentlessly. Every second stretched the tension tighter, as though the entire room held its breath. Maya kept going, her determination unshaken, every move a battle against the inevitable. Then came the moment. The monitor flatlined for a second that felt eternal. Silence cut through the chaos, sharp and merciless. Dr. Hayes's knees buckled, his hand gripping the edge of the bed as though it might hold back the darkness threatening to consume him. And yet, Maya did not give up. Her voice rose again, commanding action, her hands working with relentless focus. She refused to let this child, this girl who was more than just a millionaire's daughter, slip away. The others followed her lead now, no hesitation. They trusted her, not the title, not the fortune, but the skill and courage standing before them. And in that moment, the power in the room shifted. What happened next would decide not only Emma's fate, but also the very way Dr. Hayes would see the world from that night forward. The room was electric with fear, every heartbeat louder than the storm pounding outside. Emma's small body lay motionless on the table, her fragile chest refusing to rise. The flat line stretched across the monitor, a cruel, unbroken line that threatened to seal her fate. Dr. Hayes stood frozen, his hands trembling, his mind unraveling. The man who had always been in control now looked like a stranger, helpless, broken, begging silently for a miracle. And in the midst of it all, Maya pressed on. Her arms ached from compressions, her voice sharp and unyielding as she called for one last attempt. She knew the odds. She knew how many lives had slipped away at this stage. But she also knew that surrender wasn't an option, not while a child's life still flickered in her hands. The room felt suspended in time. Nurses exchanged desperate glances, breaths caught in their throats. Dr. Hayes's eyes filled with tears he could no longer hide. He whispered his daughter's name under his breath, each syllable cracking. Then, against the silence, came the faintest sound, a beep, and then another. The monitor flickered with life. Emma's chest rose, weak but undeniable. Gasps erupted across the room as the steady rhythm returned, fragile but present. She was breathing again. Relief crashed like a wave over everyone. The storm outside thundered in agreement, as if the heavens themselves had sighed with them. Dr. Hayes collapsed into a chair, tears spilling freely down his face. The girl he thought he had lost was alive, and it was not his brilliance, not his wealth, but the strength of the very woman he had mocked that saved her. Maya stepped back, her own chest heaving, sweat clinging to her brow. For a moment, she simply looked at Emma, then at the father who had doubted her. Their eyes met, his filled with a mixture of shame, gratitude, and awe. In that instant, the unshakable walls of arrogance he had built began to crumble. The night slowly settled into silence. Machines steadied, staff exhaled, and Emma, though still fragile, was alive. The storm outside began to fade, but inside the hospital, another kind of storm had passed. One that had broken through pride, prejudice, and the illusion of superiority. Dr. Hayes sat at his daughter's bedside, his hands clutching hers as though he feared she might slip away again. He glanced at Maya, standing quietly in the corner, her uniform damp with sweat, her eyes weary but calm. In that moment, the truth was undeniable. The life of his child had been saved not by wealth, not by titles, but by the skill, resilience, and humanity of the very woman he had overlooked. For the first time, he truly saw her, not just as a nurse, not just as an employee, but as a protector, a healer, a human being whose worth could never be measured in his narrow terms. And with that realization came a crushing wave of guilt. Every dismissive look, every subtle insult, every act of arrogance now felt like chains he had willingly placed around himself. Maya did not seek recognition, nor did she bask in triumph. She simply did her duty, as she always had, guided not by ego, but by compassion. Yet her actions had left a mark far greater than she could know. In the days that followed, Dr. Hayes's demeanor changed. The man, once known for his pride, began to listen more, respect more, and carry himself with a humility born from gratitude. The hospital staff noticed, the patients noticed, and perhaps most importantly, his daughter noticed. But this story is bigger than one man, one nurse, or even one family. It is a reminder that behind every uniform, every skin color, every quiet presence in the room, there is value, there is dignity, there is humanity. The question that lingers is not whether Maya proved herself that night, but why she had to at all. Why must it take a life on the line for respect to be given where it was always due? And perhaps that's the question we should all carry with us, because until we answer it, stories like this will never stop repeating.